Imagine the most powerful sports organization on earth walks into your city hall and offers you a dream. The World Cup, millions of global visitors, unparalleled international prestige, and an explosive wave of economic growth. For decades, cities around the world accepted that offer with almost no hesitation, because when FIFA called, governments listened. Local leaders signed on the dotted line, laws were quietly rewritten, budgets were shattered, and FIFA got exactly what it wanted. But on the road to the historic 2026 World Cup, something entirely unprecedented happened. For the first time in modern sports history, the world's greatest cities actually started pushing back, and football's most untouchable empire found itself facing a problem it rarely encounters: genuine resistance. Welcome back to the channel, where we pull back the curtain on the multi-billion-dollar business, politics, and power struggles hiding behind the world's greatest spectacles. Today, we are moving past the player transfers and stadium designs to look at the hidden, high-stakes legal warfare happening behind closed doors, a battle that could permanently break FIFA's stranglehold on global sports. To understand why cities are suddenly staging a mutiny, you first have to understand how FIFA built its absolute monopoly over the global game. For generations, FIFA operated from a position of ultimate leverage. The World Cup isn't just a tournament. It's the holy grail of sports entertainment. Because every country desperately wanted a piece of the magic, cities were forced to compete aggressively against one another just for the right to play host. That vicious competition gave FIFA extraordinary, unchecked negotiating power. If one city rejected a demanding clause in a contract, another city would happily accept it. If one democratic government hesitated over spending public money, an authoritarian regime would gladly step forward to write a blank check. The World Cup was simply considered too big, too prestigious, and too valuable to lose. This toxic dynamic shaped the relationship between FIFA and host cities for generations. With every passing tournament, the contracts became larger, the requirements became more extensive, and the financial expectations skyrocketed. Because host cities desperately craved the global spotlight, resistance remained almost non-existent. FIFA became accustomed to dictating terms rather than negotiating them, operating within a flawed system that consistently rewarded its arrogance. But as the ink dried on the agreements for the 2026 expansion, the entire global landscape shifted beneath FIFA's feet, setting up a financial time bomb that no one saw coming. The sudden resistance began to crystallize in Canada, where Toronto and Vancouver quietly became two of the most critical battlegrounds in this hidden war. As tournament preparations accelerated, local officials and legal teams finally began reviewing the fine print requirements attached to hosting the expanded tournament. What they found inside those massive contracts immediately raised major red flags. It wasn't because these city leaders opposed the beautiful game, or because they didn't want the joy of a World Cup. It was because certain extreme conditions collided directly with local political realities, strict legal frameworks, and public accountability. Instead of quietly bowing down and signing away their rights, municipal governments did the unthinkable. They began asking incredibly difficult questions. Could these aggressive terms actually be legally implemented? Were local taxpayers receiving any real, guaranteed value in return? Should essential local priorities like housing and transit be cast aside just to accommodate the corporate desires of an international sports federation? Those questions might sound reasonable, but inside FIFA's traditional operating model, they represented an act of pure defiance. Unlike previous hosts who folded under pressure, these cities possessed just enough unique leverage to force FIFA into a corner. Slowly, the unthinkable happened. FIFA adjusted, not completely, and certainly not dramatically, but enough to demonstrate a massive vulnerability. FIFA could be pressured, and FIFA could compromise. That realization sent shockwaves far beyond Canada, exposing a truth that FIFA had spent decades trying to hide. Attention quickly shifted to the absolute core of the issue: the money. Every single World Cup generates an astronomical, staggering amount of revenue. We are talking about billions of dollars flowing in from television rights, massive global sponsorship agreements, licensing deals, elite corporate hospitality packages, and millions of stadium ticket sales. Yet, behind the glamorous headlines celebrating massive economic opportunity lies a deeply complicated, predatory reality. While FIFA happily pockets the vast majority of the revenue, hosting a modern tournament costs an absolute fortune. The real story of the 2026 World Cup is not whether FIFA wins or loses a specific legal argument in a single city. The real story is the permanent shifting of leverage. For decades, FIFA held all the cards. Cities begged for the tournament, governments rewrote national regulations, and public resources were instantly mobilized to cater to every corporate whim. But leverage is never permanent. It shifts when the cultural and political environment changes. The modern political world is radically different from the one that existed 20 years ago. Taxpayer scrutiny is at an all-time high. Public spending faces intense independent oversight, and local media investigates massive projects with unprecedented aggression. Furthermore, social media allows controversial, backroom contracts to become public scandals almost instantly. In this hyper-transparent environment, organizations that once operated with total negotiating power are facing a brutal new reality. Every demand is publicly questioned, every concession is heavily debated, and every single contract is examined under a microscope. FIFA remains one of the most powerful, influential institutions on Earth, and no serious observer would argue otherwise. Yet the structural fractures leading up to the 2026 World Cup suggest that this absolute power is becoming more contested than ever before. Toronto and Vancouver may not have dismantled FIFA's empire overnight, but they proved something monumental. Host cities are not nearly as powerless as they were led to believe. Once that lesson spreads across the globe, future sports negotiations will look entirely different. The historic World Cups of 2030 and 2034 will likely be shaped just as much by aggressive lawyers, stubborn politicians, and brilliant city planners as they are by football executives. Not because cities want to stop hosting the beautiful game, but because they rightfully demand a larger voice in how it is organized. The football itself in 2026 will undoubtedly be spectacular. The stadiums will be packed to the brim, the world's greatest players will showcase their genius, and fans will celebrate unforgettable moments that will live on in history forever. None of that will change. But long after the final whistle blows and the champions lift the trophy, a completely different conversation will continue to echo across the globe. It will take place quietly inside government offices, city councils, and planning departments in every major country. Future officials will study the defiance of Canada, compare the actual costs against the real benefits, and ask whether the old relationship with FIFA makes any sense at all. FIFA will soon face a defining choice of its own: adapt to a world where cities negotiate harder, or ruin its own empire by relying on a model built for a bygone era. The most important battle surrounding the 2026 World Cup will never happen on a grass pitch. It is happening right now across negotiating tables. And for the first time in history, FIFA is realizing that the other side has finally learned how to fight back.